Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Loreweek. I'm your host, Lore Runner. The lore, fit to lure you up. Gotta lore it up today. We're doing a little bit of a different look today, visually, in terms of my outfit. Just trying it out, just seeing how it looks. So, anybody feel free to tell me what you think. Normally I'd have some, like, oh, here's some little news tidbits, but ironically, all the news that's happened this week, I have to at least something to say about, so I don't really have much to say about, like little news tidbits or whatever. That's gonna be weird. What'd you find, Gallade? Oh, so you have a Costco? Jeez Louise. Let's see, I'm checking my notes here. Pretty sure everything, yep, nope, that's all stuff we're gonna talk about. Mein Gott. We're gonna be talking about Nazis! No, I'm kidding. Yes, Preacher, I've been reading, excuse me, the dev patch. Oh my god, they have Canada Dry. They don't have the right Canada Dry. I'm sad. They just have the ginger ale. For reference, I can't stand their ginger ale. I do the seltzer water. Ah! Halo is our current boss. The boss thing is just working, so I'm just going to leave that up now. Because it's suddenly working. Halo takes damage. So yeah, like I said, it's actually kind of a simple new outfit. I'm literally just a triple layering, so I got my blazer, and then I've got my usual white shirt under this, then I got the black shirt under that. That's all. Nothing fancy. I'm just experimenting. I fiddle. No, I don't, Gallade, but I can appreciate the concept because I can't find Canada Dry seltzer water around here to save my life. And I've tried every grocery store in the region. So, it's going to be a busy news week. So, now that we've talked about everything related to Tigzar, let's go ahead and move on to real topics. Where's my pen? There it is. Let's talk about... Where's our timestamp? Yeah, we're gonna start a little early. I got a lot of stuff to talk about, and then I got Telltale to stream after this. We're gonna be streaming the rest of Guardians of the Galaxy. Telltale Guardians of the Galaxy. See, this one. Yeah, I already have it up. Ready to go. Let's talk about Telltale, now that I just referenced that. For those of you not aware, Telltale has laid off a fairly large number of people. Now, as ever, our show just tends to devolve into economics. I actually talked about this exact same concept just last week. I really did. Just last week, I talked about the idea and how unfortunately common it is for many companies, not just software developers, to bring in a... to hire a bunch of people, crunch, get the product or the service or whatever done, and then fire a bunch of people. And I talked about the economic reasons for that. But I gotta share this one in particular. I don't want to rehash myself, but I want to talk about this one in particular because they fired 90 people. Now, if that doesn't sound like a lot of people, I want you to consider for a moment that there are several companies, including software companies out there, that don't have 90 people working for them. 90 frickin' people got fired. It was apparently a quarter of their total staff. Just nuked. Now, in addition to this, that's just kind of, alright, whatever. That's horrible. But the weird thing is, like I said earlier, normal business standard is hire in a bunch of people, put out a product, fire people. And again, I discussed the economic reasons for doing that. Obviously, it's morally bankrupt, but I discussed the economic reasons for doing that last week. Yeah, but wait until later, Preacher, please. Just don't forget. So, the problem is that doesn't apply here, because Telltale hasn't finished putting out some big product. Right? I mean, they're still making, and I got the list right here, they're still making the 4th season for Walking Dead, which hasn't even come out yet. Batman Enemy Within, which is still in mid-stride, and they're doing a 2nd season for Wolf Among Us. So what the hell's with this firing spree? This doesn't fit the normal pattern. This is surprisingly lighthearted music for how terrible this news is. Let me just go ahead and say really quick, my hearts go out to those 90 people. it's the kind of thing that I feel is underappreciated and acknowledged in the modern era. But losing your job is actually a really horrible thing. Some people, it's one of those things that I feel people are like, oh, well, at least you don't have to deal with such and such, or oh, it's not that bad. But no, losing your job's a really, really horrible thing, and I feel for these people. Now, I do have one little bit of silver lining before I go forward. Several other software developers, several other gaming developers specifically out there have reached out and said, our doors are open to any former Telltale employees. Assuming they mean that, assuming they are willing to open the doors and let some of those people come in and have a job, that's awesome. But this whole situation is still bonkers. Contracted? No, that's not how that works, Anthony. Unfortunately. These are employees who were fired. Let me go ahead and share some quotes, because this whole thing is just kind of... right? Like, this whole situation is just weird, as I already discussed. How's the audio volume, by the way, just real quick? I don't want to be shouting over my own music here. They released, Pete Hawley released a statement publicly talking about this firing spree. This statement is some of the most bizarre, back-talking, meaningless nonsense drivel I've read in a long time. And I want to share it for you, word for word. Okay? I also want to take a quick aside and say that I have actually spent years trying to perfect learning corporate speak, because you can usually corporate announcements don't say anything, right? But you can infer based on how they're written and how they project the information, what is actually going on, or at least some nuggets of real information, right? This is just messed up. So, we're doing a restructuring to make the company more competitive. This is word for word now. Making the company more competitive as a developer and publisher of groundbreaking story-driven game experiences. So already that's questionable. That's already something that just kind of raises a few warning bells. Restructuring is almost never a good thing to hear when it comes to any software developer. Or any IT industry at all, really. Even video game developers are not exclusive to this. Making them more competitive. What? Telltale... I'm sorry. Telltale doesn't really have a lot of what you'd call competition right now. They've kind of cornered that market. A lot. Then... they want to be competitive as a developer and publisher. And obviously, they do have their own publishing side of things. But unless I'm mistaken, they only publish their own things. It's the first thing that I look at. I'm like, because it makes me wonder if they're going to try and start going into the publishing business a little bit more. Next quote. Continuing on. This is just the first sentence. So in second sentence. This one really worries me. Our industry has shifted in tremendous ways over the past few years. The realities of the environment we face moving forward demand we evolve as well, reorienting our organization with a focus on delivering fewer, better games with a smaller team. So, you could pretty much take the first half of that sentence, chop it off and throw it out the window because it's just meaningless drivel. The only things that are really relevant to be pulled out of that sentence are: industry has shifted in tremendous ways over the past few years. This is probably more focused on either, let's see, on service games. But here's the really weird thing. Did you guys know that Telltale games are already on the phone? I know this because, and this is coincidence for me, when I was looking for games to buy for my niece that she could play on my phone during dead hours, I noticed that Telltale games are on the phone, and I looked at it and I was like, oh, there's actually a lot of Telltale games on the phone. So it's not the mobile market that's the part of the industry changing thing. And there's only really been two major changes in the industry in the last few years that aren't related to the mobile market. One is the service industry thing, and the other is actually related to the service industry thing. It's the competitive multiplayer thing, which is effectively merging with the service industry. Functionally. You know, I'm not actually sure if Telltale is publicly traded, but I believe they are. I can check really quick. So yeah, exactly. The mobile mindset instead of the mobile market. Good way to put that, Roxamus. And then they say this thing, focus on delivering fewer, better games with a smaller team. If that doesn't sound suspicious to you, may I remind you that Telltale, within the last year, has done the exact opposite. They have been focusing on stretching out their avenue and markets to the point where they can make multiple games simultaneously. They are, as of right now, working on Minecraft Season 2, Walking Dead Season 4, Wolf Among Us Season 2, and Batman Season 2. These 4 games are actively going. If I was to go back in time 1 week, we would up that number to 5. Because, or actually it's 2 weeks, excuse me. Because they were also working on Guardians of the Galaxy Season 1. 5 games actively being crafted at the same time. Next point. This is getting fun. The company says they are planning on moving development to the games to more proven technologies that will fast-track innovation in its core products as it works with new partners to bring its games to new audiences. Yeah, this whole new partners thing. That's it. That's the end of the statement. Sorry, I've reached the end. But so, more proven technologies. Some people, perhaps idealistically, perceive that as a sign that they're actually going to change engines finally. By the way, it's worth noting that switching engines is actually a huge deal, which would require more employees, not less. And certainly, you know, more money involved. Unless they decided to fire people to free up money to change engines, which... okay, let me talk about something really quick here. This is purely the realm of hypothetical, but I've seen it happen before. Let's assume for a moment that you're a manager, okay? All right, hang on. Put on my manager hat here. Alright. Okay, so you're a manager, right? Now... Nope. Whatever. Here, let's move to the side. There we go. We'll do this. As a manager... I don't even know what I look like. I don't have my screen up. I want you to assume for a moment that you're in a situation where, for whatever reason, the why almost doesn't matter here, but for whatever reason, there's a big shift to do something that is expensive, but you are also simultaneously being forced to cut costs. What do you do? Now, there are ways around this kind of a problem. There are temporary solutions for bringing in temporary capital to a market with the intent of thereby being able to turn around and make a profit. Basically, investment opportunities. There's several different ways that you can do that. There's also the possibility of trying to very carefully manage your budget and expenses, spend some real time going down the books, trim actual fat from the budget, and try to look at this and like, okay, maybe we need to spend less money on this and this and this so that we have the money available for these things. Or, if all of that just sounds like way too much work, way too much effort, you know what you could do? You could say, alright, I'm going to fire these 90 people, and then I'm going to tell the other, I guess that would be 270 people remaining, do better or you're fired too. Work unpaid overtime or you're fired too. Work extra long hours or weird shifts, and really put in crunch time, which is now mandatory, or you're fired too. Those are what we in the business like to call the easy answers. And they're pretty much almost universally a bad sign for a company. Some companies get away with that for longer than others, but pretty much in general, that leads to bad stuff for the company long term. There have actually been several companies which have effectively been gutted by those kind of policies, where employees leave in droves to go to other companies, and then the company struggles with the fact that they can no longer hire people appropriately because they've already destroyed any goodwill they might have amongst the employment pool, and yada yada yada. So this is all just a mess. This is, of course, just the realm of speculation. That's my guess. Yeah, I decided to grow my hair in one very specific spot, too. Next point of topic. Hang on, let me close this out. Close this out, too. Speaking of bad management practices, who here likes The Witcher 3? Honest question. I do. I obviously do. No.
Zug zug.
Ah! I wasn't even looking at the screen. What'd you do? It was Easel who's trying to hurt Halo here. Now let me go ahead and admit something. I love Witcher 3. Love, not like. I think it's an absolutely phenomenally amazing game. I adore it. I really want the chance to play it again. And in fact, the fact that people have been wanting a Witcher 3 low run means I will get that chance to play through it again. Very interested, very much love it. That's just my opinion, of course. Now, I've actually already talked about this on Loreweek, so this isn't really new, but it's a somewhat different angle on the same topic. So, here's the topic in a nutshell. Bad management. Now, I'm going to ask you another honest question. If I was to say to you, there's a manager who's, abusing his position. There's a manager who's an idiot. There's a manager who's making a bad business practice, right? In other words, if I say the word manager to you, what's pretty much the first thing that just jumps to your mind when I say that? Honest question. Because I know what my mind jumps to. I can almost visually tell you. My mind just kind of jumps to the PHB over in Dilbert. Not the real-life PHB. Yep. First gut reaction when I think of a manager. Sorry, hang on, I'll switch the music. What else we got? I'm on a playlist that's supposed to be songs that are good for the background. Since we're in despair, I think this is an appropriate song title for this topic. Now, I bring this up because it's one of those things that I'll be right back. The general public consciousness has reached the point where it's okay, it's normal, it's the everyday thing for a manager to be an empty suit who has no idea what they're doing, who is spending more time justifying their own paycheck and making sure that they get proper returns rather than trying to do what their job actually is, blah, 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 right? That's pretty much the norm, at least here in the States. I don't know about other countries. I forgot to turn the fan off, Easel. I just didn't notice because I was so focused on the Telltale thing. Apologies, guys. Anyways, because I kind of tuned that fan out. It's on, like, 24/7, basically. So, I know this is going to sound like one of those weird things that kind of is a duh when you think about it, but a manager's job is to manage things. If you have 20 talented people in a room, and these people are all talented and skilled and artistic and creative, I'll tell you what kind of a product you're going to get out of that. You're going to get a mess. Because that's what management actually is. Or I should, to phrase this a little bit better, what management actually should be. It's one of those weird things that a lot of people don't really understand, but think of it, to use a television and a movie thing, think of it like a director. Because that's what a manager's job really is. The manager's job is to direct their employees and try to pull the best performance out of them possible and try to make sure they're coordinating with others properly. Yeah, a good manager keeps everyone on track, makes sure we're going forward, make sure we know what we need to do, etc. It is to manage. A manager's job is to manage. Now, this is something that is so ordinary for it to be bad, for us to have bad managers, that I feel a lot of people tend to forget that good management is an essential, even critical element to a lot of things, but most especially game design. Let me just go ahead and say, really quick, it is literally a miracle that Witcher 3 is as good as it is. Whether you like it or not is of course your opinion, your preference, but it should have been much worse than it is. I have heard so many different reports. Again, we've already talked about this. We've already talked about reports coming out from CD Projekt Red. We've already talked about ex-employees. We've already talked about people who were driven away from it, who were fired because they disagreed with the boss. And every single thing, 100% of it that I've heard about their management practices is practically a textbook of what not to do. Let me give you an example of this. One thing that is very important for a manager to do, this is just one of their jobs, is to properly delegate. Now, I admit I had some problems with this too. I had to learn this when I first started working as a manager. I had to learn to delegate because it was my natural inclination to just kind of take care of everything. But speaking from experience, and this gets worse the larger the project or the larger the team, the more you look out at it, the more you try to spread yourself thin, the worse you're going to do in basically every aspect. You need to be efficient about your reallocation of your resources. I know we all talk about, is this another thing? I've actually never talked about this directly on the show, but I've implied it like a dozen times because one of the important things is properly managing your budget, right? And we all think that, that just means chopping off money by firing people and spending money on stupid things. But no, I mean actually doing a good job on your budget, actually properly allocating resources. Don't walk up to someone who has a great artistic mind, and I'm using a direct example from my own real life. He has a great artistic mind, and he's got great experience with Macintosh servers and Linux servers and Unix servers, and say, all right, we're going to put you on the phone for the Windows box because we need a resource there. Don't do that. This is a real story. This actually happened to a gentleman, a friend of mine. Don't do that. That's bad management. Okay? Bad management is basically... Let me use food as an analogy. I love using food as an analogy. Let's say you got an apple, okay? Now, good management is taking this apple and getting it to someone who's hungry and letting them eat that apple. Lack of management is the apple doesn't exist. They're just hungry, which is bad. Bad management is offering a poisoned apple to the person who's hungry, and a real apple goes in the bin where it will slowly rot. And I'm using this analogy, this is kind of poorly constructed because I just made it off the top of my head, so forgive me, but the point is that bad management is not just worse than good management, it's actually poisonous. It's literally poisonous to a work environment. Getting back to Witcher 3. I'm not going to go over all the details. There are other people who have gone in depth. I've actually heard that same tale, Taitu, third hand in my case, obviously, because I'm here in the States. But I've heard that. There was such an insane turnover rate at CD Projekt Red. There was such an insane lack of proper distribution of priorities, and like, seriously, go look at the credits for Witcher 3 sometime. People, there are certain roles that are literally not in the credits because one guy was doing all those jobs, you know? And there's a huge amount of cronyism and elitism. When I say elitism, I specifically mean cliques that was going on as far as the management. You know, you needed to do this because you needed to get in good, and office politics. And it's one of the worst examples of office politics I've ever heard. And I've experienced office politics myself, personally, in 2 separate companies. So, just this mess, this huge mess. Again, it is nothing short of a miracle that we got Witcher 3 and that it was anywhere near as good as it is. And it also kind of helps to explain why Witcher 3 had the troubled production period it did. Some of you may not remember that because, you know, but Witcher 3 was announced way before it came out. And in fact, here's another one for you. CD Projekt Red actually announced the Cyberpunk 2077 or whatever game before Witcher 3 came out. Some people don't remember that because people were hired on to work on Cyberpunk 2020 who never worked on it before they were fired. Ended up working on Witcher 3 instead. As far as the managers who are still working there, most of them, at least most of the specific names I could point to are, including the gentleman who's creative lead, pretty much the director of the creative department. That's bad. In fact, that's horrible. You know why? Because I think they're learning the wrong lesson. This is my terrible thought, because Witcher 3, again, very successful, both critically and financially. Whether you like it or not, you know, obviously opinion is opinion, but it was very financially successful, and it was very creatively successful. And they, so they might think, oh, well, this method just works. In fact, I'd be shocked if that's not the lesson that certain people learned there. If I could be so bold, this is my opinion, okay? This is pure speculation. It is my opinion that the only reason Witcher 3 is as good as it is because the actual people, the grunt coders and designers and developers working on it, were really, really committed and had a very good work ethic towards putting out the best product they could. My opinion. Also, and I bring this up because I've actually talked about this before. I've talked about how much I want more games like Witcher 3 and CD Projekt Red, and a few people mentioned how they had blown. This is like over a year ago at this point. How much money they had blown on marketing, and that's what initially prompted me to start looking into this, and led to the previous Loreweek a couple months ago where we were talking about their bad management practices. Because of the many other faults, trust me, I could just go down the list. I'm not going to waste your time. Again, other smarter people have gone down the list of all the things they're doing wrong. But one of them is budget. CD Projekt Red has blown money, just like so many other big companies have, in ways that is frankly ludicrous. But anyways, so let's move on. I don't really have much else to add to that. It's a damn shame, but I bring this up because, you know, I keep constantly being asked, are you looking forward to Cyberpunk? At this point, as of this exact moment, I'm not sure I am anymore. I am simplifying because I don't feel like going into details, but I completely disagree with the intent of that statement, King Boble. Utterly and completely. The idea of it being okay to continuously hire new personnel rather than sit down and take some time to do a proper restructuring is what I would call stupid. Moving on. Let's go ahead and talk about Respawn. Anyone want to talk about Respawn? Honest question. Oh, if I could just say one other thing. Obviously, there's some level of corporate garbage that's going to happen in every company. I mean, obviously, duh, right? But just getting back to the CD Projekt Red thing. For one last thing, I'm just going to say that I find what they're doing, they're criminal. And I'm just going to say that as bluntly as I can. When you reach that level of employee abuse and cronyism and misuse, criminal misuse of assets and people and talent, that is unacceptable. Moving on. So, Respawn, for those of you not aware, is the company that made Titanfall and Titanfall 2. Now you might be like, why does that matter to me? Well, funny story. Some of you may or may not be aware of the fact that Titanfall and Titanfall 2 and Respawn, the company in general, is mostly constructed. I shouldn't say mostly. I don't know the actual percent. But I know several people working there are people who used to work at Activision, at the Modern Warfare department specifically. And in fact, the developers of Modern Warfare 1 and Modern Warfare 2 are the people who ended up kind of bowing out and moving over and forming Respawn, and then publishing under the EA label to make Titanfall. Now, or excuse me, Infinity Ward, not Activision. Thank you. That didn't sound right. This is one of the reasons why Modern Warfare 3 was, regardless of quality, very different from Modern Warfare 1 and 2. Excuse me. Pardon me. Anyways, so just a little fun bit of backstory. So for those of you not aware, EA has acquired Respawn. Yeah, this is what Tai2 is talking about, is one of the things I mentioned about not properly allocating responsibilities. So anyways, getting back to my point. Respawn made Titanfall, which existed. I mean, I'm a little amazed they made a Titanfall 2, to be completely honest with you. Titanfall 1 was essentially a multiplayer-only thing, which told its story through the excuse me, through multiplayer missions, which is something I'm worried about you know, some other games like Overwatch doing in the future. And God, I'm sorry, my brain is just gone. Okay. They made Titanfall 2. Titanfall 2, by all accounts, was great. I haven't played it myself. I never actually got the time to, and back when Titanfall 2, Battlefield 1, and Infinite Warfare all came out, I had to pick one. I had to pick one specific item to choose, and I picked Infinite Warfare. I did end up very much liking Infinite Warfare, but by all accounts, Titanfall 2 is a very good game, and I do actually want to cover that at some point in the distant future. Now, the relevant point here is that when I first mentioned this news to a friend of mine, and I think I mentioned this on stream as well, some people's reaction was, wait, I thought Respawn was already an EA thing. This is the main thing I want to talk about, because we all know this is the first warning sign. There's no news there. We all know that this is one of the first steps in EA's usual process, and I have talked about EA's usual process of consume, ruin, redistribute, over and over and over and over. I've brought that up like 20 times on my show, at least. So I'm not going to go into that yet again. This is EA and the consume stage, and then they're going to just do what they always do, and then Respawn's going to cease to exist, or functionally or literally, just like happened with Visceral, and blah, 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 blah. Again, this is not the news part. The thing I want to talk about is how this works from a functional perspective, because, and I want to talk about the relationship of a publisher to a developer, and the difference between an umbrella and an attaching line. So, I know, right, Preacher? I want you to, so this is probably going to be duh information to some of you, so forgive me. But what I usually use the term umbrella to refer to this, because you've got this one major arcing company, like Alphabet, for example. And Alphabet is like, all right, well, we own Google, and I forget the other two's name because they're kind of irrelevant. All of those companies are under the umbrella of Alphabet, okay? Makes sense? The umbrella is basically the closest thing to what people usually mentally think of when they think of the word corporation. Now, that is not literally a corporation, but that's only because the actual definitions of financial bodies and business bodies tend to be deliberately vague and misleading. So, I like to use the term umbrella. It makes it nice and simple. So, the EA umbrella, in fact, actually, I meant to pull this up. Forgive me. Give me 1 second here. The EA umbrella is actually gargantuan. We say EA, but EA is actually just one company within the overall umbrella. If you give me a moment here. Yeah, obvious umbrella core thing. Okay, so we've got EA Worldwide, we've got Criterion, we've got EA Digital Illusions, we've got DICE, we've got Ghost Games, EA BioWare, BioWare Austin, Motive Studios, Respawn now, that's a new one. EA Sports, which actually is EA Tiburon and EA Canada. Then we have EA Maxis, which actually is 3 separate studios. Then we've got EA All Play, which is 2 separate studios and includes PopCap, by the way. Then we've got a huge list that I'm not going to go down. It's an absolutely gargantuan list. It's like 30 different companies. All of this is in the EA umbrella, okay? So the relevant point here is that Respawn didn't used to be in the umbrella. Respawn had a contract. It was actually a turn-by-turn contract where it's like, okay, Respawn made the game in a vacuum, completely separate from everything else. Although that's obviously not 100% true. But you get my point. They made the game, and then they walked over to EA and said, we want you to publish our game. Now, to be blunt, publishing isn't what it used to be, and probably shouldn't be considered the same as it has been. I think we are due for a major restructuring of the very concept of publishing as far as video game development. But the way it used to work is if you made a game, you literally required a publisher. It was 100% mandatory because you needed a publisher to get out there, to market it, to physically print the CDs or the cartridges or whatever, and then to actually package it and distribute it, right? That was mandatory. Nowadays, it's not really the same level of mandatoriness, but a lot of AAA developers in general, and AAA developments, I should say that in a more proper term, tend to be unfortunately married to the concept of publishers. Even though we are in an era right now where that's no longer required. We have Steam, we have Good Old Games, we have Origin if you feel like using that, although there's some caveats with that one. It's also possible to just release your own game under your own auspices. It has been more easy. It has been made more easy now than it has ever been to properly do that. Now, you're like, well, okay, that's all digital distribution. What about physical media? Well, the thing is, again, and I hate to use this because everyone just makes fun of me for the current year argument or what the hell that actually means, but it is 2017. This random nobody nothing, could contact a person, a company, whose job it is to produce box art and boxes and print those out. I could contact a company and get a work order put in for making CDs or making DVDs or making cartridges. I can do that. Now, I can't do that for every console. For example, I couldn't do that for the Switch because Switch cartridge production basically has to go through Nintendo because it's their console. But I could do that, for example, for the PS4, and I could do that for the Xbox. I could do that. Now, it would be expensive, but you get my point. I don't actually need a publisher to be my go-between anymore. We're past that era. However, most companies who are trying to put out a AAA kind of thing will go to a publisher. Now, because, and Carbon's pointing out something because this is relevant, the way that publishers have stayed current is they have turned into investors. So nowadays, what will usually happen, and this has happened many times, in fact, Bethesda, which is one of the few, in my opinion, truly good publishers left, does this a lot. Someone will come to them and say, we want to make blah, we want to make this game, and they're like, okay, well, how much money do you need to make that game? And in exchange, we will get X% of the profits, basically. It really is just straight up investing at that point. And as Carbon points out, EA did actually invest into Respawn in this specific case. So EA fronted some of the money for the production of the game, basically taking the place of Skyrim or traditional investors. And then the game was made, and then EA handles printing and distributing, which are the other two big things. Now, and yeah, even Bethesda has questionable practices. That's absolutely true. It's just I think they're the least bad, if you want to phrase it in such terms. So, this is the arrangement that existed before now. Respawn had EA as a publisher. EA fronted some money, basically functioned as the investors' side. They made Titanfall. EA distributed Titanfall. They made Titanfall 2. EA distributed Titanfall 2. Right? Very simple. Now Respawn is actually a product of EA. As of this point in time, EA is now in ownership, and Respawn is now under the umbrella. Now, if this wasn't EA, what would that change? Ironically, not much. From a purely paperwork perspective, again, just imagine if it wasn't EA. We'll make up a distributor. We'll call it Princess Peach Distribution, okay? So, if Princess Peach Distribution had already tossed out the money, had already become the investor and the publisher for Respawn Games, and then decided, we're going to go ahead and bring you in under the umbrella. So you are now under the umbrella of Princess Peach Games, okay? It's actually not a bad thing, really, and I mean that with total sincerity, because now all you're doing is formalizing the overall arrangement that already existed with the assumption that it will continue existing as is. Also, and this is the other big important part, as of this point now, they don't have to go through the contract process every single game. Let me explain what I mean by that really quick. So, Respawn goes to EA and says, we would like you to invest and publish in our game. EA says, all right, let's sit down and write down a contract. Now, I don't know what that contract is, and I never will, because that stuff is behind closed doors. But the general idea is, okay, we will do this for you, and we will gain this % of the profits. That's the most fundamental, again, I am simplifying, but that's the fundamental function of these contracts that they go through. So they did that. Titanfall 1 happened, some time passed, and then they're like, okay, let's go to Titanfall 2. Titanfall 2, they sat down, thank you, Marley, and they said, all right, we want to do a Titanfall 2. And EA said, okay, let's sit down and make a contract. Because when you're a publisher, you have to contract every game individually. Now, you could probably see how this can be so easily abused. But again, on paper, assuming reasonable individuals, this is not a bad thing. Because now they just write one overall, like, written... it's not actually a contract, but, you know, they basically write out one contract that says, this is the arrangement going forward, and then they don't have to sit down, renegotiate, redesign, and do more market studies and all that fun stuff every single time they want to push out a game. They just say, all right, we want to push out a game. Okay, Model A, go. Now, of course, this is EA, and we know exactly what their business practices are because we've seen them for the last 30 years. So, we'll see how that works. Oh yeah, God, union meetings. I wasn't even getting into that. So, that's the significance of Respawn going under the EA umbrella. I hope I did a decent job of explaining that. Yeah, a company offering to buy stock as a way of investment is a very old, very boring trick, if I could be blunt. It's a trick that goes back to the 1700s, at least. Oh yeah, we'll give you funding. Tell you what, rather than just giving you a loan, why don't we buy stock in your company? Okay, yeah, we'll just buy some stock. Oh, look, we actually have a majority vote now. By the way, majority vote when it comes to stock kind of varies, but it doesn't require 51%. I try absurdity. It requires having the most singular chunk of shares. There's actually companies out there where someone owns 7% of the stock, and they actually have the majority shareholder. You know, that kind of a thing. Just thought I'd toss that out there. Shares are a whole other topic I don't even want to get into right now. So, speaking of companies, who wants to talk about Portkey Games? Where's my timestamp? 40. God, I've been talking way too much time. I'm sorry, guys. I talk too much. You know, I actually got insulted just this last week for saying I love the sound of my own voice, which is funny because I actually can't stand the sound of my own voice. Exactly, Carbon. Exactly. So, let me ask a semi-related question. How many of you out there have ever thought, you know, man, I really wish I could have a really great insert franchise here game? We've actually talked about this recently on my show. Man, I really wish I could have a really good Star Wars game. Man, I wish I could have a really good Star Trek game. You know what I would have loved? A really good Matrix game. We did get one. Path of Neo was actually a good game, but the others, you know. So, man, I really wish we could have a really good Harry Potter game. Now, let's go ahead and be honest. There are, by all accounts, and I have to say from secondhand information here, that there are actually good Harry Potter games. I don't know that personally. I do not agree with that, Carbon. I played Matrix Online. But I am told that several of the earlier Harry Potter games, I guess that would be the PS1 era or so, were actually good. And several of the Harry Potter Lego games are pretty good. From what I understand, again, I have not played any of them personally. But, or was it PC? I could be wrong about the era there. But regardless, the relevant point here is that, oh, PS2, okay. So we've got Harry Potter 2, Chamber of Secrets on the PC, and the Lego game I just mentioned. Have we got anything else? Yeah, all the Lego games are pretty good. Kind of almost generically good. It's weird. Okay, I'll give Anthony his day in the sunlight. So we'll go ahead and say a Harry Potter Quidditch game. I don't even know what that is. And Harry Potter 1. So that's 4 games for the Harry Potter series that are good. You probably already see the direction I'm going with here. Wait, the 4th game was a shooter? What? Anyways, Portkey Games is a new development studio that has been recently created. I forget which umbrella they're under, forgive me, but they have been created specifically and formally for the purpose of making Harry Potter games. Basically, there's actually some backstory and history on this. I don't want to sound horrible, but all I'm going to say is J.K. Rowling is not that great of a person, in my opinion, and has made some very questionable decisions regarding her IP. She's also ridiculously wealthy, and that admittedly irritates me a little bit. She was one of the most individually Portkey Games. Anybody who's actually read Harry Potter knows what I mean when I say a portkey. But yeah, so she's made some questionable decisions. I don't want to get into that. That's a whole other topic. All that's relevant for this is that she has been pretty against really properly franchising Harry Potter up until I guess about 1.5 years ago as of this point. And she yeah, I know, right, Max Time? It's right here, Mandarn. See? It's right here. I put it on the screen. Y'all asked me to put the songs on the screen. So she has finally acquiesced to say, okay. But the thing is, it doesn't really sound like what it should be. Basically, this is opinion. But, I'm getting to it, Preacher. This is opinion. But, no, the movies are a separate thing. The movies are a very separate thing. And I think I mentioned this during my Harry Potter 3 Rumination. Rowling had basically executive veto over the movies. It was one of her conditions. Which I understand. But, cursed child. Anyways, so about 1.5 years ago, she just kind of started being like, all right, cool. And totally, I think it might have actually been 2.5 years ago now. I might have been losing track of time. But relatively recently, she decided, do whatever. This was actually the beginnings of what led to the development of now, the company, which has currently been in the development of several Harry Potter games for, at this point, about a year. Portkey Games, as I mentioned earlier. And they're wanting to expand and do more Harry Potter games because they basically have won the licensing agreements from her. And, well, they wanted to do another movie series. The, oh God, I can't remember what they were freaking calling it. It's the one that they did the first movie of, and then no further word on if they're actually going to be continuing that series. It was supposed to be a whole movie series. Anyways. So, what it sounds to me like is she stopped caring. Yeah, Fantastic Beasts, thank you, the Fantastic Beasts series. It sounded like she stopped caring. By all accounts, it sounded like she's made her money, she's made her fortune, she's done what she cares to, and now she's just going to saunter off into the corner, post on Twitter, and just doesn't give a crap anymore, and is going to let people do whatever with whatever. Now, that is speculation. I don't actually know if that's true, and it doesn't even necessarily matter. What does matter is... Okay, so it is finally being cast. Jesus, that was really delayed, Carbon. Yeah, I know, right, Darth Tyron? Yeah, Harry Potter's old, and she's ridiculously rich off of it. It is worth noting, by the way, I'm actually a fan of Harry Potter. I have no shame of admitting that. I started off... I think I've said this story before. I've started off as a mocker of Harry Potter, and then I read the first 2 books, and then the 3rd book, pretty much in sequence, and it was like, oh, and then I turned into a Harry Potter fan. It is also kind of funny to note how much of the Harry Potter books that she didn't actually write, she had a ghostwriter work on. But that's unrelated. Point being, this whole Portkey Games thing is all about trying to go ahead and actually make some proper Harry Potter games. And I'm like, okay, cool. Because on the surface of it, that sounds awesome. Forgive me, I don't remember who said it in chat earlier, but someone tossed out the idea of, hey, you know what? You know, it'd be cool if we have a proper Harry Potter RPG. I actually agree with that. Yeah, that's a cool idea, you know? Let's go ahead and have a proper Harry Potter RPG. Let's have, you know, a Harry Potter, like a Telltale type thing, you know? A year at school. It doesn't even have to be at frickin' Hogwarts. You know, we have more additional world than just the frickin' this tiny little slot of Britain. No offense to British people, but, you know, she does do this, she does build up little tidbits of the rest of the world. It would be great to really start expanding to the rest of the world, not counting those little side books that have come out. And yeah, the Fairy Tale Logic RPG, again, the setting's premise is super inclined in that direction. There's a lot... I'm going to cut myself off. There's a lot you could actually do with this. Now, that being said, what do you think is most likely for us to actually get out of Harry Potter games from Portkey Games? Keeping in mind this is under... I'm almost positive. Let me double check this. I don't want to give bad information. I try to do due diligence. It's my own fault for not looking this up, but I'm almost positive. I'm right. Portkey Games is actually under... You ready for this, guys? The Warner Brothers umbrella. For those of you... Oh, visual novel. It's another good one. For those of you who don't understand why I'm going... Ugh, it's because the Warner Games video game umbrella is arguably one of the worst that there is. I know we all... I mean, we just made fun of EA earlier, right? We all make fun of EA. We all bash on Activision, you know. Warner Brothers, in my opinion, is arguably worse in many respects regarding their corporate approach and their policies and the way they approach their games than the other major publishers out there. Arkham Knight is a goddamn great example of that. And what they forced into Shadow of War is another example of that. You know, another fantastic example of that. So... It's not like we haven't gotten good games under the Warner Brothers label. You know, it's not like that's impossible. It's just... We'll see what they do. Yeah, Warner Brothers. I admit I have a personal stake in hating Warner Brothers because they killed Asheron's Call. Pretty much directly and deliberately. For no reason. Like, there was no reason for them to do that. It cost them nothing. I did a whole stream about that. I encourage you to go watch it because more people need to know about Asheron's Call. Just look it up. Asheron. Just look up Lore Runner Asheron's Call. Anyways, so now that I've talked about the realities of the licensing, and I've talked about what could come of it, what I now have to say is, given the reality, it's okay, Carbon. It's okay. Just found another company. Switch publishers. Switch publishers. I mean, you know what? I'm just curious, just for the sake of it. But I don't think there's anything yet. This was the official announcement just went out like last week. But I'm picturing mobile games. I'm picturing really, Carbon. That is actually, I'll take that as a compliment, sir. I'm picturing mobile games. I'm picturing service games. I'm picturing loot box games. Yeah, that's what I thought. That's okay. I was just curious if anything was out now. There's actually no Harry Potter games out on the phone right now. How's that for weird? At least not on the iPhone. There might be on Android. I don't know. Oh yeah, there's also the Niantic alternate reality AR thing. I believe you, Carbon. I don't remember. I apologize. My memory is not as great as I'd like it to be. I believe you. I'll watch this later, Zoan. Not right now. Neat. There we go. So anyways, that's news. Yay. Next point of topic. I don't have any good segues from here out, so let's go ahead and talk about Activision. No, I swear it's not related to the previous topic. Something has happened that had made me legitimately angry. I had to take a moment and calm down. I was that upset about this. Anybody who knows me knows that I really, really hate copy wrong. And I really hate people who abuse the legal system for their own greedy, selfish, small-minded, short-sighted greed. So the company that makes Humvee is suing Activision. Give me 1 second. I need to pull up the actual quote. I thought I had it up, but obviously I don't because I'm not even looking at it right now. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Do you have the quote? No, you don't have the quote. Give me a second. I need to read this for you. This is so stupid. Damn it. I'm having trouble finding the whole quote. I was just reading this earlier this week. I read the whole suit. I read the whole damn thing. It pissed me off, every inch of it. Give me just 1 second. I'm going to try one more thing. I think I was actually looking at it on my phone. I get a lot of news on my phone, specifically for Loreweek. They're seeking compensatory, I think I'm pronouncing that wrong, punitive and triple damages from Activision for this, by the way. For those of you not versed in legal speak, that means 3 separate instances of increasing amounts of money that they want out of Activision. That's all they want. They just want money. It's all about money. They are suing them. I'm doing a little better. Thank you, Hates Disney. They're suing them. This is so goddamn stupid. So, for those of you not know, Humvee it's AM General. Hang on. For those of you not really aware, this is an absolutely ridiculous amount of money that they're trying to sue them for. We're talking in possibly hundreds of millions, but at the very least in tens of millions. This is a pure money fight. Here we go. Thank you, Revenstig. Okay, so... Go ahead, SJ. Let me just go ahead and say the obvious. This is bullcrap. Like, I know a lot of you don't really like Activision and all that fun stuff, but this is 20,000 kinds of bullcrap. It's one of those situations where just because you are going after someone who is bad does not make you good, kind of a situation. But now let me actually read this for you. So AM General, which is the people who own the Humvee trademark and copyright, have said, and I quote, "The success of the Call of Duty franchise came only at the expense of AM General and consumers who are deceived into believing that AM General licenses the games or is somehow connected or involved with the creation of the games. AM General said Call of Duty's use of the Humvees is a primary and key selling feature of the games, and in Modern Warfare 2, specifically, multiple in-game missions and multiplayer levels include depictions of vehicles bearing the or substantially similar distinctive design elements of the AM General trade dress, which is the infringing vehicles. In some instances, the game player is able to, and even required to, in order to progress the game, climb into the infringing vehicles and climb in, viewing the interior, and ride around in the infringing vehicles while controlling and firing a weapon on the vehicle. In others, a player is tasked with manning a weapon from a helicopter to protect the infringing vehicles that are seen driving on the ground below. At various points of the game, the infringing vehicles are explicitly and misleadingly identified using AM General's marks, such as Humvee01 or M1026 HMMWV. In other instances, the characters explicitly and misleadingly refer to the infringing vehicles as the Humvee, including dialogue that states, "We're leaving Hunter 3's Humvee, over." And so again, they're going after them for compensatory, punitive, and triple damages. Again, tens of millions, if not more, in terms of money. This is straight from the legal claim. I actually read the actual suit, but I was having trouble finding it. Now, the funny thing is, this suit alleges, gotta stress that word, that they have been infringing on the AM General brand since 2003. Here it is. Found the number. Since 2003. Now, some of you might be like, hold up. Like, there's a limit on damages suits. There's a limit on time for that. And that is absolutely true. Unfortunately, there are ways to legalese around that. I'm not going to go into the details. It's a lot of bullcrap. But basically, all they need is a modern Call of Duty game that uses a Humvee, and then they can that is within the range of them filing the suit, and then they can basically grandfather in the last 14 years of games into that as well. Now, you might be like, why would they do that? Well, the relevant reason is because if they sued them and won for one Call of Duty game, which I'm not even sure which one it would be, because Infinite Warfare, I don't think that had Humvees, and obviously World War II didn't. But, if they found one game that had Humvees in it, the amount of damages given to them is shrunk. But if each game you add to this, you see? So, now, I know a lot of you are probably sitting there, and I bet your first reaction, I wasn't actually reading chat while I was reading the suit, but, I bet many of you were like, ha ha ha, oh, that's funny, but this isn't funny because they might win this. Now, I'm not saying they will win this, do not take this as a statement of red, but it is within the realm of possibility that they could win this, and if they do, it is mega bad. Ignoring the fact that this is going to rip tons of money out of Blizzard Activision. Remember that umbrella thing I talked about earlier? But if they did this, this establishes very strong precedent for other companies to go after other companies, basically just 'cause By the way, for those who are not aware, it is actually so common to squat on rights or to try to use rights solely for the sake of suing or trying to rip money out of other people who actually craft something. There's actually a common term for it. It's called a copyright troll. It's a normal thing. I've actually reported on that a few times on Loreweek. Look at the freaking, I can't remember the name of the company. What's the name of the company? Takoida, I know you should know this. It's the Battletech incident. You know what I'm talking about, right? With, oh god, Macross, I want to say, or something like that. Who've been squatting on those rights. Yeah, trademark troll and patent trolls. Who've been squatting on those rights and using them to try to wring money out of people making actual Battletech games for the last 30 years. And restricting the construction of Battletech games for the last 30 years. Yeah, it was Gold... Thank you. Gold Star or Gold Hark. I know what you're talking about. And Harmony Gold. Yeah, Harmony Gold. Blech. And it was Gold something. Yeah, this is the kind of thing that's unfortunately regular. Nope. Doesn't apply, hates Disney. The argument, I guarantee you, the argument they will use is they could have easily and smoothly had any other vehicles, or they could have just licensed them. They could have just gone to Humvee and said, we'd like to license the rights to use Humvee. Now, you want my opinion on this? This isn't about winning the damages. The reason they're claiming such high damages is twofold. Number one, if they win, they get a crap ton of money. But number two, they're trying to scare Activision into going and properly licensing things. And when I say, I shouldn't say properly, it's really wrong. Basically, they're trying to bully them into getting more money. Humvee has actually licensed specific games in the past. I don't remember any of them because they're all crap. But I'm serious. I actually played one of them and it really was crap. But they do license these games out, but they charge a fairly large amount of money. Humvee specifically, AM General, I should say. AM General charges a lot of money for licensing, excuse me, the Humvees. And in principle, I don't agree. I don't agree at all. Because my reasoning behind not agreeing is the timing. If they had walked up in 2003 and said, hold up, you didn't license that, and Activision would be like, you're right, and then ripped the money out of ripped their money out of Activision early on. Okay, this is a naked grab for more money. This is a naked greed grab right here. So anyways, the idea here is that they are once again trying to bully them into getting a better licensing deal. And I want to stress that way, because on paper, and I want to be as fair about this as I possibly can, even though I am actively angry to the point where I'd be okay with AM General falling off the face of the earth. But to be as fair as possible, if Activision wanted to put out Modern Warfare 4 and they wanted Humvees to be in it, then realistically speaking, they should actually go to AM General and say, we'd like to put your trucks, whatever the hell they actually are, into our games. And then buy the licensing right. Or, if the money being asked is too much, just don't put them in the game. Now, I do agree with that sentence. I do agree with that concept. But again, what's going on here, my opinion, what's going on here as of this point in time is that AM General is pushing... You know what, I'm actually going to do this in an analogy. How many of you played EU4? That's a bad analogy. Let's not do that. Let's not do that. The point is, they are pushing for this in a specific and deliberate, with specific and deliberate intent to bully them so that they can get a better deal. Oh, you better license from us or else. And then they'll be able to claim, basically charge more for the licensing rights than they otherwise would. I don't remember who Jeep belongs to. 2011? Give me a second, I need to look something up. That's not going to help me. You know, it just occurred to me. There might not be a legally established statute of limitations on copyright violation. Hello, Mr. Darkness. I'm serious, there might not be a legally established time limit on that. There might be an assumed time limit because, you know, there's assumed time limits on so many other aspects of legal function. If anything, I imagine it's something that Disney would have approached. Whatever. Point being that I hope AM General dies. Moving on. No, seriously. Screw him. Let's talk about some more positive stuff. Don't worry, I have some 3 things that are at least more positive to talk about than all this garbage. I feel like Jim Sterling sometimes. One of these days I'll have positive things to talk about, because positive things will happen. Oh my gosh, I've already been talking for an hour. Let's talk about Star Wars! Da, 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 da. Oh wait, I can't hum that theme or I'll be sued for it. No, I'm kidding, I'm kidding. I have been copy-wronged for the Star Wars music more than once. In fact, some people can't even view all of the Tor Let's Play on my channel because certain parts of it have music that's copy-wronged. Anyways, I swear we're going to be positive. Who knows the name Rian Johnson? Rian Johnson is an interesting situation. Now, I've actually spoken as recently as yesterday about how much I don't really care about Kathleen Kennedy. Oh, God! I have talked about my fear. Thank you, as ever, War Wager, for your continued support and help. Let's talk about Rian Johnson and the new Star Wars trilogy. Yes, he is the person who directed The Last Jedi, or whatever, Episode 8, the one that's coming out in just a little over a month now, by the way. How's that for a weird thought? Now, the problem here, we don't know anything about the trilogy. Let's just establish that. They're making a trilogy. He's the mainline director. The end. That's all we know. Okay? I'm not really going to talk about that because we don't know anything. You know? But what I do want to talk about the fact that they're making a new trilogy, which I think is relevant. It's going to... I'm sorry. We do know one other thing about it. Forgive me. It's not going to be part of the Skywalker trilogy. I know that. So, trilogy, Rian Johnson's mainliner, and it's not going to be the Skywalker saga. Those are the 3 things we know. Forgive me. So they make a new trilogy. That's relevant. And Rian Johnson's the mainliner for the entire trilogy. Now, for those of you not aware, picking one director to mainline an entire sequence of films is actually pretty damn rare in cinematography. Probably the most famous example of this that I could mention is Peter Jackson with the Lord of the Rings trilogy. That was, as I talked about during my ruminations of the entire sexology, the sitting down and getting Peter Jackson to be the guy for all 3 films was actually a huge gamble on the behalf of the people, and people were like, you know, a lot of things, a lot of miracles happen to make that original trilogy happen. He then unintentionally became the mainliner for the Hobbit trilogy. I've talked about that one too. But generally you don't see this happen. Very rarely do you see this kind of thing happen. And in fact, the recent trilogy is an excellent example of this. Episode 7 and 8 and 9 were intended to have different directors. Gotta put it that way. That being said, let's talk about something significant to the point here. And that significant point would be the fact that Kathleen Kennedy has been... I shouldn't put this on her, forgive me. Let me just say this. Disney has been cycling through people when it comes to the Star Wars films. I've actually talked about this topic as well, separate on Loreweek. It just, nope, he's not working out. Nope, they're not working out. Nope, he's not working out. It's actually gotten to the point of being kind of a joke. It's one of the reasons why I had to affix my statement earlier, because Episode 9 was originally going to be directed by someone else, actually 2 someone else's, if I'm not mistaken. And now it's going to be back to Abrams. for episode 9. And even that might actually be changed at this point. So who frickin' knows? But it's relevant then that they are willing to pull him on as the mainliner for this new trilogy, because it means that as of now, before episode 8 has even come out, they have a significant and sufficient amount of investment in this guy that they're willing to go ahead and trust him with this. That's a weird thing to do. Now, this could, of course, turn out to be completely false. They could change their mind on this in the future. By the way, I should explain what I mean by mainliner a little bit. Mainliner basically means you're the primary creative force behind a sequence of events, you know, a series of games or a show or a movie. To use an example, oh God, I can't think of his name. JMS, J. Michael Straczynski, was the mainliner for Babylon 5. Roddenberry was the mainliner for Season 1 of Star Trek: The Original Series. You know, this is, I'm just trying to give examples. It's kind of rare in television. I shouldn't be using television examples. Even when Del Toro was actually going to direct the Hobbit trilogy, Peter Jackson was being considered as mainliner for the series. That's probably a better example of what I'm talking about. So it is possible that they will still pull in either different directors or this director, regardless, to direct the three trilogies. Excuse me, the 3 films in the trilogy that he's working on. But the idea is he's been granted this pass to say, this right here, this is your baby. Yeah, Moffat. That's another guy, Moffat over on Doctor Who. You know, that's the mainliner. So this is your baby. Make it work. That may lead to him directly directing. Some people prefer that, you know. That may lead to him just kind of being what is usually referred to as an executive producer. Or excuse me, a senior executive producer. Don't know. That's the first thing I wanted to talk about. It's interesting that this much faith is being put in him, that he's being granted this position. Again, when episode 8 isn't even out yet, we don't know how well it's actually going to be done. We don't know how successful it's going to be. Although it's probably worth noting that episode 8 is already a financial success. Yes, really. In ticket pre-orders alone. Yes, I have my tickets too, by the way. So anyways, and yeah, Feige is another excellent example of a mainliner of the MCU movies. 2 periods in history, as we talked about when we did the Thor Ragnarok thing. Anyways, so this either shows that they are very trusting in what he did creatively or financially, or, here's the other possibility, this might be just a move that doesn't mean anything. You know, basically the cinematic equivalent of title granting. In other words, oh yes, this is this, therefore you should think of it as more than it is, kind of a thing, right? In fact, it looks like Roxymus just mentioned the same idea. You know, this might have been done to drum up hype and ticket sales of episode 8. Probably especially because of the fact that Disney has recently decided to rip even more money than they usually do out of theaters. It is also possible that he is someone who is willing to toe the party line, although, I don't know. I don't have any information on that one at all, so I can't speak to that. Now, just really quick. Yeah, exactly, Max Time. Who knows? Who knows? This is all pure speculation. Unfortunately, we have very little information to really talk about here. But I do want to talk about the trilogy thing. That's the other half of what I wanted to talk about, because, and this will lead into another thing. This will be my next topic, related to my next topic. They're making another trilogy of Star Wars films. How do you feel about that? Legit. Now, while everyone's typing their answers to that question, I'm just going to say, I know I'm a little bit of an outlier, because I don't really have fatigue problems with franchises. My go-to example is Assassin's Creed, right? I never got tired of Assassin's Creed, because as long as it was actually a good game, I didn't mind, right? Woo, you know. But one of the concerns that's been leveled more than once about this is the idea that this is going to create a Star Wars fatigue. Let me put it to you this way. We had A New Hope, which was kind of on its own, then Empire and Return, boom, boom, right? Big pause, because Well, if I was to point to a single reason why there was a big pause between that and the next film, it would be because of the fact that George Lucas got a divorce. I'm dead serious, by the way. That financially ruined Lucasfilm for several years. Go figure. Anyways. Then, a lot of time passed. Episode 1, 2, and 3, pretty much bam, bam, bam. Again, one right after the other. Then there was a pretty big pause as well. And then episode 7 came out. Okay. And then Rogue One came out. And now episode 8's coming out. And I believe it's next year is we're getting the Han Solo or the Obi-Wan one. One of them's coming out next year. So they're already trying to do the yearly movie thing. The Clone Wars does not count. I'm sorry. Clone Wars does not count. That was not a film. Okay, Han Solo's next year. Forgive me. The Han Solo's the one that's next year. I knew one of them was next year. So yeah, it feels like they're trying to do the Marvel thing, which is funny in its own right, because it does work, and it's the same overall umbrella. Remember, MCU and this Star Wars thing, they're all under the same umbrella here. What Ewok movies tie to? Someone go murder tie to really quick. We do not know, Necro. It is a trilogy of films that is not connected to the Skywalker saga, and that's all we know. It's the only real details. I guess what this boils down to is the fact that I don't... Thank you, Easel. How do I put this? Forgive me. Yes, yes, there really was, Preacher. This doesn't bother me on the surface of it. The idea of a Star Wars movie coming out every year, as long as it's good, that's always the relevant point. I like that. No, I do. Now, granted, I don't suffer from franchise fatigue, so I'm a weird person to talk about this. But for me, okay, that sounds cool to me. Now, it is worth noting that they're using completely different teams, and by all accounts, what they're going to be doing, and indeed are doing right now, is the exact same thing they do over on the MCU. Completely separate team, group, organization over here. Completely separate team, group, organization here. This one releases the one that comes out this year. This one releases the one that comes out the next year, etc. They vary up these teams and the production, and they usually are working on multiple at any given point in time in order to avoid creative fatigue, which is weird when you think about it, because that's absolutely the right thing to do. Let me turn this around a little bit. I want you to imagine for a moment that Star Wars was going to do this yearly Star Wars movie thing, and it was going to be the same team each time, same director, same executive producer, same mainliner, same writers, same actors every year. Picture that for a moment. At some point or another, creative fatigue sets in. At some point or another, people are going to go like, ugh. And I don't mean the people watching it. I mean the people making it. So the fact that they're divesting this, the fact that they're specifically working to avoid that, is something that I am in favor of. Yeah, it would be the Police Academy problem. That's actually a great way to put that. Yeah, that's another thing, Huthor. If I could be so bold, financially speaking, there is no MCU fatigue. I've heard that so many times. I've heard that for like the last 2 years, I think. When did Ant-Man come out? Because that's when I really started hearing about it. Get in, Gary. When Ant-Man came out, I heard so many people talking about, oh, I'm just tired of MCU movies. And I heard so many people say, well, I liked Ant-Man, but oh, it was an MCU movie. I'm so sick of MCU movies. And yet, the MCU movies have continued to sell very well, actually. So, I mean... functionally and realistically speaking, that fatigue is not being proven by facts. I'm obviously not saying that there aren't people who are getting fatigue problem. Of course there are. But I think we've got a little bit of a silent majority thing going on here, where people are like, dude, you know, let me ask a question. How many of you who are already fans, I gotta stress this, if you're already a fan of the MCU, how many of you are excited to or plan to go see Black Panther? I'll go ahead and raise my hand on this. 2015. Okay, thank you. So 2 years, 2 years. I'm seeing Black Panther. I'm looking forward to it. It looks good. Now, it helps that I'm a bit of a fan of Black Panther, but, you know, whatever. And this is making my point right here. Again, I'm not trying to sound snooty or uppity, but statistics are kind of backing up my opinion on this one. The idea that while there is absolutely some kind of fatigue setting in, there are still plenty of people who are still like, yeah, in we go, right? And I liked Thor Ragnarok. In fact, I loved Thor Ragnarok. I liked Guardians of the Galaxy 2. You know? I'm looking forward to Infinity War, which is also next year, by the way. So we'll see. Now, I'm not saying that the new Star Wars trilogy is going to be good, or even the Han Solo film is going to be good, or whatever. What I am saying is that I want people to walk in with a slightly more open mind than I've been seeing. Almost everyone I've heard talking about the new Star Wars trilogy. Oh, the horror. Oh, God, there's this new Star Wars trilogy. And it's this, oh, God, it's going to come out every year, and it's going to be terrible, and it's going to be fatiguing. I just want you to take a moment, take a breath, and take a step back from that automatic bias that I understand, and just hope for some good films, because that's all I really want. Yeah, I actually talked about that next time during the thing. I really hope we get some good Star Wars films out of this, but who knows? At this point. Speaking of Disney... Told you this would be connected point here. Speaking of Star Wars fatigue, speaking of fear, be afraid. Yeah, let's switch down to. Whoops, I'm on the wrong thing here. Hang on. Where's oh, I don't have it on here, do I? Ah, whatever. Will of the Lich King. That's a good thing to talk about. So, let's talk about Disney's Netflix wannabe. Now, I've actually brought up Disney's Netflix wannabe before, and I've mentioned how, from my opinion, from a purely financial perspective, that it was stupid of Disney to go and make their own Netflix wannabe rather than just jumping on board with Netflix like they have been doing for the past several years. I even gave my... I even gave my fear. Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it. I even gave my reasoning. I even gave my economic, financial, and creative reasoning for why I think they should buy Netflix. That was actually my idea from an economic perspective. Now, so for those of you who know where Disney's putting out their own streaming service, it's actually not going live for a bit. In fact, it's probably not going live for about 2 years. 2019 is when it's supposed to be going live. Now, you might be like, okay, well, why are you even talking about this? Well, a couple things. First of all, I wrote it down here. So they have 4 new shows. 4 new shows that they have planned for this Disney-only streaming service. One of which is a live-action Star Wars show. Gut reaction? Before I say anything else. Second show is going to be something based on the MCU. Another one. Third one is going to be a show based on Monsters, Inc., which already sounds like a terrible idea. And the fourth one's going to be a show based on High School Musical, which I think that's a movie, but I don't know anything about, so shrug. A live-action Star Wars show. We've never actually had that. Now, I haven't seen Rebels at all. I just haven't had time. I have seen a fairly large amount of Clone Wars. And one of the things I find really weird about Clone Wars is that it is just as horrible as it is awesome. You know what I mean? I bet a lot of you know what I'm talking about. There are some truly face-palmingly bad episodes of Clone Wars. And then there's episodes that are just amazing. Yes, it's so incredible. Yes. You know what I mean? So, I'm not sure what I think of this. Really? Really, Gallade? Wow. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that opinion. No, Taichu, no. Also, I don't really think that counts. I think you're pulling it technically. I know you're just poking fun, or taking the piss or whatever, but having an actual long-term, real television show, live-action Star Wars television show, is something that's interesting to me. Something that I'm curious what they could do with it. Now, I've already talked about how much I feel that Disney making their own little streaming service is a bad idea. I've done a little bit more looking into this recently, and the more I look into this, the more I think that it's past the point where they could reverse engine and go ahead and just buy Netflix, and you know, as I mentioned, and then move forward with that perspective. Instead, it seems like they are fully committed to this whole Disney streaming service, whatever the hell they're going to call it. Now, here's something interesting. Now, I'm going to admit that what I'm about to say is basically a trick question, but they are putting out, they're going to be putting this out again starting in 2019, and it's going to be cheaper than Netflix is. That they're going to have a deliberately lower pricing point for Disney Netflix, Disney Flix, or whatever they're going to call it. Specifically, their specific reasoning is because of the fact that they have less shows, and therefore less volume than Netflix does. What do you think about that? It does make sense. That's why it's so tempting. I would say with at least 80% certainty that this is a hook. That this is a deliberate thing to get people to be more on board with something that, let's be honest, you're not already on board with. I mean, to be completely blunt, how many of you are automatically disinclined to sub up for another streaming service? I'll go ahead and raise my hand on that. I don't want to. I still haven't subbed up for CBS's thing because I haven't had time to, and I don't want to. Right? So, you lower the prices to make it more tempting, to make it easier for people with less money, or more tempting for the people who do have the money to go ahead and sub in. And as they increase the amount of shows on the service over time, they will increase the price. Yeah. Very Disney. I actually am subbed to Netflix as of right now, but I admit that's actually... I literally only do it for two reasons. One, it helps me to exercise. I watch stuff while I'm exercising. It helps to keep my mind distracted because exercising is damn boring. And two, and this is actually the primary reason, it's for my niece, so she can have stuff to watch. Let's talk about the shows they're coming out with. So, Star Wars live-action show. Now, yes, hashtag screw CBS, always worth noting. Stranger Things, not my style. So we've got the Star Wars live-action show. Call me weird, but I'm at least tentatively excited about that. And my reason why and I've said this for years and I'll say this for years, is that I feel that if you divorce television from what is required to make a television show, that television is a wonderful medium for telling a story. It's one of the better mediums for telling a long-term ongoing story, in my opinion. The only problem with that is the reality of making a television show, which makes it one of the worst mediums for telling a long-term show. But with Disney backing and the Star Wars name, there's at least a possibility that they could actually do a proper long-term contiguous story arc thing with a Star Wars TV show. Maybe. I don't actually know. But what I'm most worried about, and I know this is going to sound weird, is the special effects. Because I actually talked about this recently in one of my ruminations that you guys won't see. It's one of my Star Trek ruminations. I think it was a DS9 one. Yes, it was a DS9 one. For the episode Move Along Home, I talked about this, so look forward to that. It's going live in January. Just to rehash my point very quickly, science fiction is unfortunately but unavoidably married to special effects. A science fiction show is almost invariably going to be more expensive to do than a show about a bunch of people in a house. Or, you know, a mystery drama thriller or whatever. It's almost unavoidable. That has always been a problem. That has been a problem going back to the 50s, for God's sakes. So, you know, you have to, you have a television show that's based in a science fiction setting. You got to have those special effects in, and that cost of those effects can, in some cases, basically kill the show. How many of you have watched the show Space Above and Beyond? I have, of course. It's actually a really great show that I highly recommend. That did a lot of things very well done. Actually, I have Haze Blaze. But the relevant point here is that Space Above and Beyond was really, really expensive. The whole reason that show became only 2 seasons was because of how incredibly costly it was to make. Now, it's relevant to note that the reason it was so costly was because they refused to skimp. They refused to compromise on what they wanted to do with their visual effects. And the visual effects were almost universally done to complement the story. You know, good application of effects, as proper science fiction does, right? So, what we have is a situation where I'm kind of worried about a new Star Wars live-action show because of the special effects requirement. Because I guarantee you, whether consciously or otherwise, people are going to walk into that show expecting to see basically the movies in terms of overall visual quality. Now, Game of Thrones recently kind of changed the dynamic there. Because Game of Thrones proved that you can have high-quality, movie-level special effects in a TV show and still make money. So this brings me to my speculation. I think that's what they're trying to do here. I think Disney is trying to pull a Game of Thrones. They've got the Star Wars label. They're going to push it to look as good as the movies. And they're going to try and see if they can make that lightning, you know, strike twice. Because for those of you who don't remember, Game of Thrones was a huge gamble when it came out. Huge gamble. Nobody really expected it to take off the way it did. But they were like, all right, let's try it, and right? So, we'll see. We'll see if Disney can accomplish what HBO did, because I think that's what they're trying to do. Otherwise, it would just be cheaper in almost every way to do another animated or CGI show. Episode 1 did have that problem, Necro, and they ended up pushing it forward anyways. It's one of the reasons Yoda looks different in the original theatrical release of Episode 1. Star Wars is a much bigger IP, that is absolutely true. I guarantee you we're going to have some kind of... That is true, Carbon. In fact, I got another example for you. Breaking Bad. I know people don't really talk about that show anymore, but Breaking Bad was actually really, really cheap to produce. In fact, if you ever look into the making of Breaking Bad, they were cutting costs everywhere. They did, however, go out of their way to spend the money they had on Breaking Bad on very specific points. And one of those points was their actors. And it kind of showed, in my opinion. But anyways. Second show they're doing, obviously, what was it? The Monsters, Inc. one. Now, this is true, Carvin. I'm just going to talk about this briefly. I mentioned earlier, I'm not looking forward to the Monsters, Inc. thing. Let me go ahead and say that I liked both Monsters, Inc. movies, legitimately. I have actually rewatched both movies, and I have enjoyed both movies. I have no shame about admitting that I like Disney movies and I like Pixar movies, okay? Come at me, bro. The reason I said that it kind of was a negative, like, kind of a thing, is because how many of you have actually seen some of Disney's movie to TV show things? Because I've seen quite a few. I can't think of any of them that were actually good. You know, there was the Aladdin show they did. They had the Lion King show, excuse me. They had Emperor's New Groove show. You remember that? God, what else? Hercules. I know there was a Hercules. There's a couple others. I think that might be the extent of the ones I've seen personally. But did Little Mermaid have a show? I didn't actually see that one. Oh, Timon and Pumbaa. I did actually see Timon and Pumbaa. Didn't quite care for it. Tailspin doesn't count though. Tailspin was different. DuckTales was different. Darkwing Duck was different because those were cartoon shows, not we're going to take a movie and make a cheaper version of that movie in television format. The take a movie and make a cheaper version format thing, it's almost a formula. And I stress that word cheaper because it's cheap television. Like almost every example I just listed of the ones I've actually seen was cheap. It was worse voice actors, it was pathetic plots, it was worse animation, and oh my god, it's just garbage. It's just garbage. You know how bad it is? My niece doesn't even like them. So that's why I was like, because, Monsters, Inc., movie to TV. But you know what I'd like? And I mean this with total sincerity. I'd like for it to work. Because it's not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea on paper. Really, it isn't. I could think of several movies. She is currently 5, SJ. I can think of several movies where it would be great to see more of that movie in television format. As long as they had good writing, and good animation, and good voice acting. Hell, you could probably even just chop it off after those 3 things. Just boop, boop, boop. So, I think it'd be kind of awesome if the Monsters, Inc. show is actually worth a damn. Who knows? It will require more investment, which is why I'm talking about it at all, because that's related to my earlier point about Star Wars. What was the other one? So they had a Marvel show. They have said nothing about this Marvel show, so I don't even know what it is. It's just some show set in the MCU. I mean, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. could be good sometimes, and then other times I just was really, really bored by it. God, what else? What's the other one that I only saw a couple episodes of? The one set after World War II. It's the something Chronicles. I can't think of the freaking name of it. It was, it was okay. Didn't really dig into it that much. And then of course we actually talked about this. Agent Carter. Thank you, Agent Carter. I guess I don't know why I was saying the such and such. Oh, because someone said Sarah Chronicles in chat earlier. I want a good MCU show. I've wanted that since Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. came out. Now, if I can be blunt, this is just my opinion, but the reason Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. wasn't good was because it wasn't being handled properly at the mainliner level. Because if you remember, that came out after Feige was no longer in charge. What? Nero's ass? Okay, fine. We're no longer in the Doom thing. Hang on. Let's go to a better playlist. I actually have a playlist called Hope, and that's kind of what we're talking about, so let's do it. So, well, it depends on who you ask, Mandarton. So, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was, in my blunt opinion, very much restricted because of the fact that Feige had his hands off the wheel because they pushed him away. I talked about this again. You know, the whole Phase 2 of the MCU was kind of a mess, and then Phase 3 has been trying to recover from that mess. That right there is why I think Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. kind of... because they weren't managing it properly. They were like, all right, establish your show, and then paddle water until Captain America 2 comes out, until Winter Soldier comes out. Why? Like, leading into it's great, but for God's sakes, why did you just have them sit there doing nothing for however long? Oh, awesome, Preacher. And why do that, right? Then it was like, okay, you know, now you can do some other stuff. But at that point, there were already creative issues. Some of the writers were having problems with it, and I think left the show. I'm not even sure about that. And it just kind of floundered, and then they just kind of stopped supporting it, you know? I strongly, firmly believe that a properly supported MCU show would succeed. And there's plenty of ways to do a properly done MCU show. In fact, there's so many different possibilities for an MCU show that it's kind of silly when you think about it. Like, I'm not even sure where to start with that, right? Then, of course, they're going to be doing a live-action High School Musical show, which I don't know anything about and don't care about. So, whatever. Daredevil, I was told I shouldn't watch. And I agree. But, if Daredevil's good, then good. As it should be. I think that's everything I had to talk about that topic. I do have one last topic. Would you believe it, guys? It's a busy week. Who here follows technology? Anybody? I don't as much as I used to. Not as much as I used to. Who knows about AMD and Intel? So for those of you not aware, no, Renegade, I already have a 1080. I don't need a 1080 Ti. Really, Gary? That's actually funny. So, for those of you not aware, AMD and Intel have kind of been looking at each other. And this is actually a fairly complicated situation that's going on here. AMD and Intel are both basically going to be collaborating on future projects in order to share markets, is what that boils down to. Now, you might be like, why? Anybody who's been following the AMD and Intel thing for a while knows that the two of them have been competitors basically since AMD started existing. It's almost universally been the idea, right, of do you want an AMD CPU or do you want an Intel CPU, right? This is all about NVIDIA. This is all about NVIDIA because NVIDIA has been crushing in terms of sales for some time now and is at the point where NVIDIA can by themselves be a sufficient, I guess, rival, antagonist, whatever you want to call it, market opponent for both AMD and Intel. Now, you might be like, huh? NVIDIA, in addition, you might be like, because NVIDIA makes, almost universally makes graphics cards, right? Well, see, here's the thing. NVIDIA has been pushing more and more in recent years, especially this last year, towards... Is this just all FF6? Are all of my hope songs FF6? NVIDIA's been pushing more and more towards a specific... I'm going to explain this wrong. Basically, it's getting to the point now where more of the load of your computer can rest on your GPU rather than your CPU. And NVIDIA cards have been very strongly pushing for that, to the point where now NVIDIA is developing whole new GPUs and better presented GPUs that can handle far more of a load that would typically be sitting on your CPU. I'm still giving a really basic explanation of this. Forgive me. I don't want to get really super technical and boring here. And I want to say I actually agree with what NVIDIA is doing. For the record, I do have an NVIDIA card. Yeah, this is all about the serialized versus the parallel processing debate. So what AMD and Intel is doing is almost the only thing they could do if they want to maintain a dominant market share. They pretty much have to get in bed together in order to properly push back against NVIDIA. It's the only real choice they have if they actually want to sit on top of the heap, or at least have a large enough chunk of the heap. Now, I'm not saying where this is necessarily true or not, but it's worth noting that it's within the realm of high probability that if AMD and Intel continue to compete with each other while competing with NVIDIA, then NVIDIA would win. Wouldn't be the first time either, if you'll remember. So, that's why they're doing this. Now, do I think NVIDIA, that's a question I was prepared for, do I think NVIDIA will push into the CPU market? I'm not sure. I think they could. I think they could push into basically pulling what Ryzen did, to put it into such terms. You know, we're going to need you to get a whole new socket. We're going to need to make you get a whole new motherboard, basically, in order to support this. But we're going to put out this, you know, this amazing CPU of Doom, which is specifically designed to work with our amazing GPUs of Doom. Now, I don't know if they're actually going to do that or not, but part of the problem is right now they don't even have to. Again, getting back to the whole serialized versus parallel thing, this is a possibility that even if they just sit completely on primarily holding the GPU market, they could just keep doing that. They could just keep continuing to produce these incredible things. I have a Ryzen. I forget which one. It's one of the best ones. I don't remember. It's a Ryzen. I have a Ryzen in my computer. And an NVIDIA. I have a 1080. 1080 GPU. And it is also probably worth noting, and I'm sure I'm not the only person. Apparently I have a 1800X, thank you. It's probably worth noting that... how do I put this? I can't be the only person... I can't be the only person who thinks that it's interesting how NVIDIA seems to be pushing into the console market more and more the last few years. And I think that's probably a really, really wise move for them to do. And I think at this point, regardless of what they're doing with regards to this latest Intel collaboration, AMD has basically fallen out of the primary GPU competitor's race. So, I don't know. At this point, I don't know. This is just weird news. And the problem is this could go bad in so many different ways, if you think about it. This could actually go pretty bad in multiple different ways for us. Because if the AMD-Intel alliance decides to try and lock down and crank up prices, or push out worse quality stuff, or whatever, then we have a problem there. And if NVIDIA decides to pull the same general garbage, then once again, we have the same general problem here. So, I don't know what to make of this. This is just weird news at this point. Yeah, that is also true. That is the one. I mean, how many games have you played lately where the opening thing says, NVIDIA? I don't know about the X-Bone. I don't know what the X-Bone's GPU is. Next. I should look up something. Hang on. Let me look up some stats. Let me not speak from ignorance. Hey, Zephyros. Okay, so yeah, I was right. The Switch is using an NVIDIA. I guarantee you that's related to this too, by the way. Oh, okay, a modified Jaguar. I believe you're right, Necro, although I haven't been following that as closely as I think. That's true, the graphics in the Switch are absolutely garbage and terrible. That's not the point I was making. Also, I don't agree, if my sarcasm isn't obvious. I think the Switch looks great, personally. Fight me. That being said, my relevant point is that the Switch is selling like crazy right now. The Switch is selling so well right now, it's actually kind of insane. And especially given that its overall library just is not that big yet. And NVidia are the ones producing that GPU. So, now again, this is not new. NVIDIA's been working with Nintendo for forever. In fact, I think since the GameCube, I want to say? I'm not actually sure about that. It's been a while. Yeah, it's exactly right, Easel. It's selling like a 3DS, even though it doesn't have the library. You will, probably. Fingers crossed, you know. Yeah, no kidding, Renegade. Anyways, that's actually all I got for Loreweek. I did have one other thing, but I guess at this point I might as well just save it for next week. Jeez, we had so much to talk about this week. So I'm going to go ahead and chop off the local recording.